Starting. Okay, Bez Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Horayos, daf Yudala, the last daf. And we're starting from daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph towards the bottom over there, by the Mishnah. We're talking about whose life do you have to save first? So the Mishnah says, Kayin Kaidem LeLevi. Certain people are more important. So Kayin takes precedence over a Levi Yisrael. Yisrael takes precedence over a Mamzer. A mamzer takes precedence over Lanosin. Nosin were a group within the Jewish world, doesn't exist now, but at that time existed within the Jewish world. They were Jews, but they couldn't intermarry with regular Jews. They were a gzeira that Yeshua and David put on them. They cannot marry into regular Jews. So they were called Nisinim because they were Nisin comes from they had specific, menial jobs within the Jewish people, water carriers, wood choppers, etc. So they were Jews for many years. Vinosin Lager, and a Nosin takes precedence over a ger, somebody who just converted. The Nosin takes precedence. The ger le'eved mishuchra, and a ger will take precedence to a slave that just got freed. A slave that just got freed, even though he grew up in a Jewish family, right? And so he was already keeping mitzvahs, but at the end of the day, he's a slave, and a slave has a certain curse attached to them. And that's why a ger will take precedence over an eved meshuchra. Amosai, when does this all, when do you, and this is regarding respect and etc. Bisman shekulim shavim, if they're all equal. Avalim hoya mamzer talmud chacham. You have a mamzer who's from Jewish lineage, but he's a talmud chacham, and you have a choice: v'kohen gadol am haaretz, and a kohen gadol who's an am haaretz. During the second Beis Hamikdash, they would put out a kohen kahanim gedolim were not the smartest people or the most learned people, so it was sold to the highest bidder. So then we say Mamzer Talmud Chacham, the Mamzer Talmud Chacham, Koidim the Kohen Gadol Amaretz will take precedence over the Kohen Gadol Amaretz. And when does this come up? Let's just say that when it comes to getting hostages out, right, releasing hostages, so you first, try to get you try to follow the order in the Mishnah. Kohen Koidim LeLevi. Kohen will get redeemed before the Levi. Shnema, how do you know the Kohen had more Kedusha than the regular Levi? B'nei Aaron and Moshe, Vayibadal Aaron was separated out. Kodesh, Kadoshem, Nagdisha, so he had a certain Kedusha. Kahanim have a certain holiness to them. Levi Koidim Yisrael, Levi takes precedence over a Jew, a regular Yid. Shnema, Ba'isi Hivdal Hashem, Shevet Levi, Mitoich Yisrael. So Shevet Levi was separated than the rest of the Jewish people. Yisrael calling them Mamzer. Yisrael takes precedence for a mamzer because that makes sense. There's them yuchas. The Jew, could marry other Jews. V'zein miyuchas. The mamzer can only marry a mamzeris. Mamzer koydel l'nosin because zeh ba metipa kashera. V'zeh ba metipa psula. A nosin came from a family, a lineage of nesinim, which were never accepted into the Jewish family. Although they're Jews, but they're not. They call them the putrid drop. Nasin kaidim leger. The nasin takes precedence before the ger because zeh gadol iman b'kedusha, v'zeh gadol iman b'kedusha. The nasin happened to be Jewish for many years, so he takes precedence for a ger who just became a convert, and all his life he grew up as a guy. Ger kaidim le'even mishuchra. A ger will take precedence before a freed slave, as I explained. A slave was considered at cursed because it was cursed to be a slave. The Noach gave a curse for when he wanted to curse his Canaan. He said, "You're going to be a slave, eved la'avodim." So we see that being a slave is a cursed thing, and that's why a ger will take precedence before an eved. How do you know that Torah, once one is more learned, it doesn't make everybody the same? Actually, Torah increases your value. The Pasuk says, that once you are more precious, whoever is like a Talmud Chacham, he's more precious than the Pninim, the one that goes inside. That means Mikayin Gadol Shnichsas Lefnai V'Lefnim. A guy who's a Talmud Chacham is more precious than the Kohen Gadol that gets the opportunity to go into the Aron, to go into the inside Kodesh Kodashim. Tanya, we learned in a brayser. Shimon Yechoy Oimer. Bedinu sheyaktim Evan Meshuchel Ger. It would make sense that you should an Evan who just became free is more important than a ger because the Eved grew up in holiness. In other words, he grew up in a Jewish family. He kept some of the mitzvahs. And this one did not grow up in a ger, just started the religion not too long ago. The Eved Meshuchra, the freed slave, was part of a cursed it had a label of being cursed because he was a slave, and therefore the ger will take precedence over the Eved. Shalu Talmidav es Rab Lazar bar Tzadok. The students asked Rab Lazar bar Tzadok, "Nei hakol rotzen lisa gyares vein hakol rotzen lisa meshuchreres." Amalehem zu ha'is b'chal arav zu ha'is b'chal arav. They asked the question: why is it factually the humans that Jews want to marry a gioris? And they wouldn't want to marry a meshuchreres, a shifcha that just became freed. You wouldn't think you would want to marry a shifcha that became freed because she knows something about the religion. But the answer is because she was a shifcha, she was a maid, she is included into some curse. And therefore people avoid that. I guess because the shifcha has a very low self-esteem, shows she was more promiscuous than a regular gioris who just became a gior, although she grew up in a normal family. So therefore, people are more prefer to marry a gioris than to marry a freed shifcha. Shalu Talmidav Rab Lazar. But they asked the students asked Rab Lazar. I guess he ran like a blog with you could ask questions to the rabbi. They asked him a question, but why is a dog more attached to its owner and a cat is not more attached to his owner? A human who eats, let's say, from a piece of bread that a mouse bit into, it causes you to forget your learning. It causes somehow it affects your brain. So the cat that eats the mouse itself certainly will forget who his owner is. But a dog does not eat anything of a mouse, and therefore the dog always remembers who its owner is. Shalu Talmidav Rab Lazar. Why are people so afraid of mice? I'm always getting calls, call the exterminator, we're seeing mice and etc., etc. Why is it that way? Because they have a bad Yetzirah. Mahi, what is the bad Yetzirah of a mouse? Rava Amar Filiglimid. Even clothing, which is not edible for them, they munch on clothing. So you see, they're just munching on everything, and that makes people very nervous. We go to Daf Yigimel Amabes. Rapapa Ama Afilu Shufta Mari Gaitza. They even will bite on the handle of a hoe. Anyway, we learned before that there are many things that cause you to forget. There are 5 things that if you have in your diet, okay, it causes your memory to be diminished. I'm not sure how to explain everything, but if someone eats the leftover food of what a mouse ate, or the leftover food of what a cat bit into, you'll forget whatever you learn. If you eat the heart of an animal, if you eat a lot of olives, I guess olives have very, very high fiber, and that affects your memory. Someone who drinks the water that was left over after a bath. And if you wash your feet, one foot on top of the other. And others say, when you fall asleep, you put your clothing under your head and use that as a pillow. All these things will cause you to forget your learning. So what are things that will help you remember your learning? Chamisha dvarim meshivin es Talmud. There are five things that cause you to remember your learning. And even if you forgot it, it will, jog your memory. So what are they? Pas b'chamin. If you eat bread that was roasted over coals, the kolshkein pechamim atzman. And certainly if you would eat, I guess, I don't know, certainly if you warm yourself up with hot coals. Well, that's what I saw. He eats a light, omelet without salt, an egg omelet without salt, barogel b'shem and zayis. And here you see the difference. If you eat olive oil, that's good for you. So that helps your brain. Barogel b'yayin and b'samin. And someone who drinks, who has a custom to drink wine and smell spices. Someone who drinks the water that was used to knead a dough. The Yeshamin and others say, if you just take your finger into salt and then eat the salt, that helps you jog your memory. So aragul b'shem and zayis. So we see that there's a difference between olives and olive oil. Olives help if you eat a lot of olives, and then it affects your memory. If you eat olive oil, then your memory is good. Messiah Rabbi Yochanan, this proves what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Kishem shazayis mishakeach talmud shel shivim shana, kach shel zamazayis meishav talmud shel shivim shana." Just like olives make you forget your learning of 70 years. If you knew something for 70 years, so it's so embedded in your mind. If you eat a lot of olives, it'll cause you to forget that. But however, if you eat olive oil, it could reconnect the neurons together and you'll remember it. So we learned that if you have a custom to drink wine and smell spices, that's good for your brain. That proves what Rava said. Rava, chamra, because I used to drink a lot of wine. I used to smell a lot of besamin. Pakchen, that made me into very smart. If you dip your finger into salt and drink it and eat it, it's also good for your memory. You stick one finger there. So the Gemara says, Rosh Lakish says it's achas, one finger there. Kitanoi, that's really machlekes tanoim. Rabbi Yehuda oima achas v'lo shtayim. Rabbi Yosi oima shtayim v'lo shalosh. You have to stick one finger, not two fingers. Rabbi Yosi says two fingers, but not three. V'simonach kamitza. And the way to remember the machlekes is you have a kamitza, as you can see in the screen here, that if you put your ring finger down, you'll have one versus two, and that's how you'll remember the machlekes. One opinion was put one finger in salt, and the other person said, no, you put two fingers in salt and eat it. That's good for your learning. Says the Gemara, now that was talking about memory. Now the Gemara says, what about your cognitive function? To learn, right? So I can tell you the truth that, as the Gemara says, Asar Dvarim Kashal and Talmud, there are 10 things that make it difficult for you to learn. Somehow the learning won't go in. If I were to add one thing, let's say a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Now, for some reason, if you learn it, it's not going to help your learning. So the Gemara is saying that there are 10 things that make it difficult for you to learn. Ha'oiver tachas afsar hagomel. If you go under the bit of a camel, the mouthpiece of a camel, I guess you walk underneath it. The kolshkein tachas gomel atzmi. If you walk underneath a camel itself. If you walk between two camels, something to do with camels over here that make you forget your learning. One has to think about how that connects with Parshas Chayesara with the camels there. Anyway, if a person walks between two women and then he goes to a shir, two women are talking and you walk in between to go to your shir, it's going to be hard for you to learn. And the opposite is also true. If a woman just walked between two men, then they're going to have a difficulty in learning. If a person surrounds himself with the bad smell of a dead carcass, that's what it means. The carcass smell is above you and you're smelling it. If a person goes under a bridge where water did not pass under this bridge, let's say it's a dried out riverbed, for 40 days. If you eat bread that wasn't cooked enough, Va'oichel basar mezuama listin. He eats meat from a certain type of spoon that's used to push the broth away. I couldn't figure out what zuama lister is. The type of spoon. Va'ashoicha b'amasamayim. Va'ashoisim amasamayim. Someone who drinks from an aqueduct. Ha'oiveres beveis hakaris that passes through a cemetery. The aqueduct passes through, the stream passes through a cemetery, and you're drinking from that water. And if a person looks at the face of a dead body, it makes it difficult for you to learn. And others say, even somebody who writes, who reads the print on a gravestone. So that if you read it intently, it causes you to forget your learning. Tana Rabbanim, the rabbis taught. Now we talk about the honor you're supposed to give to rabbis. Kishad Nasi Nichnas, when the Nasi, here it doesn't mean president, it means the president, it doesn't mean king, it means the president of the Jewish people comes to the room. Even if there's 100 rows, everybody gets up. If he walks into the stadium, everybody has to get up. Then Yoshua, no one's allowed to sit until they tell them, until he says, okay, everybody can sit down. Kisha'ah Bezdin Nichnas, when the head of the court enters the stadium, not everybody has to get up. They make a row in the path that he is walking, a path to his right, a row to his right, a row to his left. The Av Bezdin goes in between, and those that are in the row are standing until he sits down. And he doesn't have to give permission to sit down. They can sit down on their own. I guess this is the Rosh Hashiva that comes in. So he's the smart person, but he's not the leader of the Jewish people. One person gets up as he passes, then sits down, and the next person gets up and sits down until he gets to his place. So in other words, the lower title you have within the importance of the Jewish people, the less respect you need to be shown. B'nei Chachamim v'Talmidei Chachamim, if you have the sons of the Chachamim, or the students of the Chachamim, right? Bizman shaz rabban tzrich lahem, if their Rosh Hashiva is needed, so it's not, you want to show respect also for his own kids and also for the students of his yeshiva. So then we give them permission. Mafsin al roishe am. They're allowed to come late and step on other people when people used to sit on the floor. And they're allowed to come late and walk in between the people. It looks like they're stepping on the people's heads. Yotza l'tzarech, he has to get up to go to the bathroom. Yikones v'yeshem and when he comes back, he could go back to his place. B'nei Talmidei Chachamim shemamunim aviyam parnas al tzibar. The sons of Talmidei Chachamim, that in addition that their fathers have an important position on the community. So let's say the head of the Chevra Kedisha or something like that. Bisman sheyesh lehem das l'shmoya. If they could understand the shir, the learning. So their father is sitting on the dais, so they could also sit on the dais. Nichnas v'yoshim lifnei aviyam. They could sit in front of their fathers. V'achareim klapiyam, and their backs are towards the people. It means they can get the front row right in front of their father. Bisman she'ein lehem das l'shmoya. If they're not such Talmidei Chachamim themselves, so they can go up onto the dais, but nichnasu v'yoshim lifnei aviyam upneim klapiyam. They could sit right next to their father, I guess. Lifnei aviyam wouldn't make sense, but right next to their father, but in back of their father, and their faces towards the people. Rab Loza, but this is all respect because their father has an important position. Rab Loza, Rab Tzadok, Oima Apa Beis Hamishta, Oisim Snifin. Even in a house, we make separate appendixes for them where they can sit. Not only for the important Rosh Hashiva, but also for his family. Omama, we learned before, Yatzel L'Tzairach, Nichnas V'Yashivim Kaimeh. Omar Papa, Loy Omar Lekatan. We learned that you're allowed to leave the shir, if you're a Talmud Chacham, to go to the bathroom and then come back to your place. Papa said it's only if you had to urinate. Aval Gdoilim, if you had to defecate, Loy, then you can't come back to your seat. Why? Because Havalei Lemivdek Nafshemi Kara. You should have had a bowel movement earlier. You had no excuse to leave the shir for a bowel movement. A person should train himself to go to the bathroom to defecate in the morning and in the evening. Kadesh lo yisrachik, so you shouldn't have to interrupt your day and distance yourself from regular people to go to the bathroom. Those days, to defecate, you had to move far from the norm from where people were living. So, but the Gemara says, "Idna the chal sha'alma filik doilim nami." Today, most people are weak; they can't train themselves to be exact when it comes to gedolim. So, therefore, even if the bnei Talmud Chacham left to go to the bathroom for gedolim, we allow him to return to his seat. Rab Lazar, Rab Tzadok, Omer Alpa Beis Mishnah Oisem Oisem Snifin, Amar Rava B'Chayaviyim B'Fnei Aviyim. We make special, we give them a special seat only if their father is alive and it's in front of their father. In other words, that the father is attending this party, and their father is alive, obviously. But if you're just the son of a Talmud Chacham, if you're just the son of this great Gadol B'Yisrael, that doesn't mean that you're going to get a special treatment. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, and here the Gemara is going to say a fantastic story. In the days of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, they taught us this differentiation of class. As we learned before, that the president, everybody has to get up. When it comes to the Av Bezdin, only some people get up. And comes to the Chacham, only one person gets up at a time to show respect. The Gemara says, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Nasi, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel was the president, Rab Meir was the Chacham, Rab Nosson was the Av Bezdin. So ki have Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Hasam, have a Kami Kulam Kamei. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel would come into the let's say the stadium, so everybody would get up. Ki have Ayla Rab Meir, Rab Nosson have a Kami Kulam Kamei. During those times when Rab Meir, Rab Nosson would come into the stadium, everybody would get up for them too. Amar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, shouldn't there be a differentiation between me as being the president, the Nasi, and Rab Meir and Rab Nosson, who are just the Chacham and the Av Bezin? Taken Hamas Nisan, so they made a new rule that you don't have to get up for the Nasi, the Av Bezdin. Not everybody has to get up. Says the Gemara. That day, Rab Meir wasn't there when they made this new rule. Also, when they came, they saw that he didn't come. That they saw that nobody was getting up for them. Amr, my high. So Rab Meir and Rab Nosson asked the people, "Why aren't you getting up for us?" Amr lay. So they told him, "Hachi taka Rab Shimon Gamliel." Rab Shimon Gamliel told us we don't have to get up for you. Amalei, so Rab Meir or Rab Nosson, Rab Meir said to Rab Nosson, we got to get rid of this Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. I'm the Chacham, and you're the Av Bezdin. Let's do something to get Rab Shimon ben Gamliel to resign from his position as Nasi. My Nevid, what should we do? Neimalei Galilei Uksum. Let's ask him to learn Masechta Uksa with us. The Leslie, because we know he doesn't know that Masechta. The Kivin Deloy Gomer, since he's not familiar with that Masechta Uktzim, Neimalei will tell him you have to resign because me Amalik Vur Hashem Yashmiya Kol Tilasai. Lemin Law Amalik Vur Hashem. Who's appropriate to breathe to speak about the Torah? Mishiachal Ashmiya Kol Tilasai. If it's somebody who could teach all his learning. So Kolti Leisav, if somebody who can teach all the learning. But since Shimon Gamliel does not know Masechta Uktzim, so we'll get rid of him. Says the Gemara, V'hava ana Abezdin Ba'at Nasi, and so therefore I'm going to be the Abezdin, and you'll be the Nasi. So Shamini Rabbi Yaakov Bar Kashi Amar, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Kashi heard about this plan. This will shame Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. They're going to talk about a Masechta that he's not familiar with, and then he's going to be embarrassed. So he told him, he sat behind Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Pashad, he started explaining Uktzim, Garas, and then he started learning Utana, and reviewing it, Garas, Utrana. He kept talking about Masechta Uktzim. Amas, or Shimon Gamliel says, what's going on over here? Maybe something is going on in the Beis Medrash that they're learning Masechta Uktzin, and I better brush up on it. Yav Date Ugarse. He started learning Masechta Uksin along with them. Lamacha Amrle, the next day when they came to the base medrash, all of a sudden they said, Nesamav and Uksin, let's learn Masechta Uksin. Pasach Amar, and they started talking. Basa the Aikim, after they got up, Amalahu, I guess he said to Rabbi Yaakov ben Kashi, Eloi Gamarnina Kisfisin. If I didn't learn it the night before, I would have been embarrassed. And then he found out that this was all a plan to learn Masechta Uktzin in order to embarrass him, to get him to resign. Paktid v'apkini. So he commanded that they should remove Rab Meir or Rab Nosson mibei madrasha. They can enter the base medrash. So basically, Rab Meir, Rab Nosson were kicked out of the base medrash, but they're still the greatest people. They would write their questions on a piece of paper and throw it into the base medrash. To have a mifrik. If they could answer it in the base medrash, they would answer it. So loy have a mifrik kasui peruke v'shadi. The ones that they could not answer, they would throw the question back outside, and the people, Rab Meir and Rab Nosson, would answer it. So basically, the yeshiva was inside, Rab Meir and Rab Nosson were kicked out and on the outside. Amalu Rabbi Yossi says, the Torah is on the outside and we're on the inside. Amalan Rab Shimon ben Gamliel said, okay, the punishment is enough. Now let's let them come back into the base medrash. Me and Nick to say we should put a penalty on them. We'll never call teaching by their name. So from then on, Asikul Rameir Acherim. They nickname Rameir Acherim. Whenever you see Acherim Oimrim, others say that's Rameir. Rab Nosson, they gave a nickname Yesh Oimrim. Others say. Says the Gemara, a dream came to Rab Meir Rab Nosson to make up Zil Paisil Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Go make up with Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Ask him Mechila. Rab Nosson went to make up. Rab Meir did not go. He said, I don't pay attention to dreams. So Rab Meir did not make up with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. He also Rab Nosson went to make ask Mechila for Rab Shimon Gamliel. Rab Shimon Gamliel said to him, I don't understand why you wanted to become Nasi. Your father, it was enough that your father's belt allowed you to become the Av Bezdin, and you're not really from Shevet Yehuda. So how do you want to become Nasi? What were you thinking in the first place? So that was the story. And this happened, let's say, 100 years before the following story. Masnile Rebbe, Rab Shimon Berei. Rebbe was teaching a teaching to Rab Shimon, his son. And Rebbe is the grandson of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. And he was staying over, we go to Yadalat Aman Aleph, Loy HaYakarev. He said something, Acherim. So everybody knows it means Rameir. Amalais Rab Shimon, his son, said to Rebbe, why are we calling Rameir Acherim, and we're talking about his teaching? We should say him by his real name. Amalais, Rebbe said, B'nei Adam, this person, Shebikshu, this Rameir, Shebikshu Laka Kvoitcha Kvoit Beis Avicha. He want to uproot the honor of you and your grandfather. In other words, he told him the whole story how Rab Meir wanted to get Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, their grandfather, fired from being Nasi. Amalei, Rab Shimon said, "Begama havosim gam sinosim gam kininasim kvar avda." The pasuk says that their love, their hatred, and their competition and their jealousy is lost. I mean, he's not around anymore, Rab Meir. Amalei, Rabbi said, "Oyev tamu charavis lenetza." Yes, maybe the enemy is gone, but the destruction is forever. Amalei hanimi. So Rab Shimon said, "Hanimi echad hanim asayo." Rabbanan loya hanim asayo. Nothing. He said that's only said by when somebody actually created a destruction, but no real destruction is around because of Rab Meir. So Hadar Aslan. So again, then they changed it, and they don't call Rab Meir Acher. Amru Mishum Rab Meir. They say in the name of Rab Meir, he said, Ilu Hayatmar Layakarev. Amarava Afilu Rabbi Dan Rusahava. Even though Rabbi was mostly humble, he still didn't want to forgive Rabbi Meir. Tana, he always taught Amru Mishum Rab Meir. It was said in the name of Rab Meir. Amar Rab Meir lo Amar, but he couldn't get to say out of his mouth, Rab Meir said. He said, they say that Rab Meir said. So for some reason they had this animosity towards Rab Meir because of what he wanted to do. This is a story that needs iyun. Says the Gemara, and we'll conclude here. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Pli Gebar Rab Shimon Gamliel Rabbanan. As a machlekes, who is more, if you have a choice to make as a Rosh Hashiva, who should you pick? Chadam, as some say, Sinai Olive. Somebody who knows all his learning, a lot of Bikiyas, he should be picked as Rosh Hashiva. The Chadam, others say, Oiker Haram Olive, someone who knows how to grind, who can, who can break apart the learning into smaller parts. Rab Yosef, Sinai, Rabba Oikaharim. Rab Yosef is the Sinai, and Rabba was the Oikaharim. So according to the way they Shalchum and Taman, Ezebem Kaidim. Who should we pick as Rosh Hashiva? Rab Yosef or Rabba? Shalchulhu. So they sent back from Eretz Yisrael, Sinai Adif, pick Rab Yosef. The Amamar Hakol Tzrika L'Marachitya. Everybody needs the one that owns the wheat. In other words, Rab Yosef, he knew. He had a vast knowledge of Kol HaTorah, so he would be more appropriate to be Rosh Hashiva. Rav Yosef did not want to accept the mantle of the Rosh Hashiva. Rav Yosef alei. So therefore, it's unbelievable. He could have been the Rosh Hashiva, and then he decided he doesn't want to become the Rosh Hashiva. He'll give it to Rabbah. Even though Rav Yosef was voted by Eretz Yisrael that he should be the Rosh Hashiva. Nevertheless, Molach Rabbah Eser and Tartan Shinin. For some reason, Rabbah, again, this number 22, was the Rosh Hashiva for 22 years, and Rav Yosef had nothing. V'hada Molach Rav Yosef. Then when he died, Rabbah died, then Rav Yosef took over. V'chol Shani de Molach Rabbah, in all the years that Rabbah was the Rosh Hashiva, Rav Yosef Afila Umna Lebeisa Leichalav. He never brought a doctor to his house. In other words, whenever he needed a doctor, he would go to the doctor. In other words, he didn't feel that he's Rosh Hashiva in any which way, so he felt he was a commoner. Says the Gemara, Abaye v'Rava, Rab Zera v'Rabba bar Matana, Habi Yosef v'Tzich Reisha. Abaye and Rava, Rab Zera and Rabba bar Matana were amongst the candidates to be Rosh Hashiva. Amra, so they decided, called Amma Milsav loy mifrach lehaberesha. Whoever could say a shtickle Torah, and will have no questions on that shtickle Torah, he's going to be the Rosh Hashiva. The Kula Ifrach. So all of them said a Rosh Hashiva's Torah, and they had a question on that. They were upgeschlagen. The Abaya lo Ifrach. When Abaya said his piece of Torah, no one asked any questions. It was clear. Chazir Rabba, the Abaya the Gavaresha. Rabba saw that Abaya had a little bit of haughtiness because he knew now that Abaya is going to be elected Rosh Hashiva. Amalei, he said, Nachmeni Psach be'ema. You're still Nachmeni. In other words, you're still a Talmud of Rav Nachman, and therefore you could lead the Rosh Hashiva, but in order to become Rosh Hashiva, you have to humble yourself a little bit. Now concludes the Gemara. Ibaylahu Rab Zera Rabba bar Matana Heminei Adif, between Rab Zera and Rabba bar Matana, which one is better? Rab Zera was Chorif, was sharp, umaksha, and he would ask questions. He right away was very quick. And he can break things apart. Rabba Matana, Mosan was more patient, umasik, and he was able to get to the bottom line. He didn't get distraction. So who makes a better Rosh Hashiva? The Gemara says we take that unresolved. Hadron Allah Kain Mashiach V'Slika Allah Masechta Horayos, and Baruch Hashem, we finished Masechta Horayos and we finished Seder Nezikin. Wow, what an achievement! Take a glass of wine and celebrate with your mishpacha. We look forward to start Masechta Zvachim tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.